Just in time. Oh my goodness. All right, we got about 26 people here. I'd say we got a good crowd. We should get going here, don't you think?
I think so.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Registration Protocols Extensions Working Group. I'm here with my co-chair Antoine, and we only have an hour this time. However, we have only about 50 minutes scheduled, but let's just jump right in here, I guess. We'll get right to it here. Very quickly to note, well, you've probably seen a variety of versions of this so far in the IETF. This is our standard version that we've been using all along, and other groups use something similar. This note well is this particular version is mostly about protections, about the IETF, your contributions, status contributions, patents, and that kind of thing. It only has one comment down there at the bottom about, if you have any issues with how you're being treated at all, we have an ombuds team that you should certainly go to. And in fact, I'm going to pop up this extra slide here, a new one this time around, IETF Code of Conduct. You've probably heard different versions of this in other working groups this week. They've been asking working groups to put an extra effort into reminding people about, professional behavior or at least reasonable behavior. And so this is stating the obvious, but just seems important to put the obvious up sometimes and make sure that we're all on a good page and remind us. I'm not aware of any problems in our group, but then again, if you have been to the ombudsman about something that might have happened here, we wouldn't know anyway, unless we were somehow involved in it. So just consider this a reminder, and please make sure to do the right thing. Okay, let's move right to our agenda. This is our standard agenda. Certainly agenda bashing can happen now or at any time that anyone wants to jump in here. But this is what we've been using for a long time. You'll see here that we have 50 minutes and a little bit scheduled for today in our 1 hour session. In fact, 50 minutes and 16 seconds. So let's jump right into our welcome and introductions. And our first thing is a notes taker. Do we have anyone who's willing to write up some notes for us here and just keep the bullet points going for us? And yeah, I'm forgetting what the thing is called, but you all know what I mean. The note-taking tool. And Rick Wilhelm joined the queue here.
Let me get signed.
Go ahead.
In, but I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll join. Let me just get signed in, and I'll log in.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Rick. Really appreciate that. Okay, moving on. Trying to stay within our 4 minute. Oh, document management. I should say one thing about document management. You're going to hear a lot about this when we get into talking about our existing work. Antoine and I like to remind people that as part of adopting documents, we really would want to make sure that we have a shepherd. Other working groups do this, and this is something we've been trying to do here along the way. We will get a discussion about a new document, potential new document here. Want to make sure that we get a document shepherd with that before it's adopted and a milestone. We kind of neglected that with one of our last documents, but we need to figure out where things fit like that. And one thing to mention here, an additional thing that we haven't really said before, but as a reminder to this group, documents move along when people have energy and suggest that they move along. And it's important to keep that in mind. If we need discussion on the mailing list, let's have that discussion if there are issues. But after that, it really is up to the document author and editor to step up and ask for a document to move through the process. If there's no more discussion, they should ask for last call and that kind of thing. And just as you'll hear some request later on for adoption, again, it's really all about the document authors. moving things along. So that's a useful thing to keep in mind. Let's jump quickly to our next thing here, and we have published on our agenda. We had 16 seconds allocated to tell you none. We don't have any documents that have been published since July in our working group, and that's okay. If we move to our next item on the agenda, existing work, and we take a look at our existing work, I'm moved one too far. Status of existing work in progress. You'll see that we have 3 items actually in the publication process. Sadly, the first 2 have been in the publication process since before July, although now they are on the tail end of the process. They're both in the RFC editor queue. The 7484 biz is now moved back onto an ISG telechat. That will happen in the first week of December. But it's otherwise still on the ISG side, and hopefully it will be reviewed and approved at that point, and then move into the RFC editor side of the publication process. So let me pause here for the moment, see if there's any questions or comments about any of all that from anyone. And not seeing any hands, then let us, oh, go ahead, Antoine, you had a hand up. I saw a visible hand.
Just to remind everybody, of course, that 7484 bis is a document that is changing its status, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer in all the review stages.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is moving and upgrading to a full internet standard, and worth it for folks to keep that in mind. It's joining the other 4 of the 5 RDAP base documents, and it is the last one to move along and be upgraded. So thanks for that, Antoine. Okay, next up, we are now going to move into the bulk of our agenda here, our existing work. We have a number of documents here. We have 6 documents in here, and we give everyone 5 minutes to talk about their documents. I will do mine first, and then I will turn this meeting over to Antoine. We had an interim meeting, a joint interim meeting with the ICANN Technical Operations Group back on October 20th. We had quite a good turnout there. We've had a few of these over the last couple of years. Probably had one a year, I guess, the last couple of years. I shouldn't say a few. The reason why we do these is because, as we all know, in this working group, we don't get too many registries and registrars that participate here. We've got a really good core group, but we don't get as broad exposure as we'd really like to get. So the ICANN Tech Ops group has a very broad base of technical participants from GTLD registries and GTLD accredited registrars. So it's very helpful to expose our work there and often get some good comments about it. We'll leave it to the individual folks here who were there at that meeting to say anything about their document that they got in that meeting. It was only an hour long. We had 10 minutes of document. We had a couple of comments along the way, but more than anything else, it was good to have exposed our documents there so that we can now progress them in our environment in good conscience, knowing that we've shared them with a very broad set of people. And of course, we did our usual encourage people to join our mailing list in hopes of commenting on documents. And we do that. I do that fairly regularly in the Tech Ops group. There are a few others in this group that are part of that group, and we all like to do that at technical operations meetings. So I'll jump up to my document first there. Myself and my co-author, Joseph Yee, with simple registration reporting. Our document, we believe, is done at this point and really is ready for working group last call. So I expect that that's what we're going to do with this document shortly after this IETF meeting. And it's worth noting that this document was born out of ICANN Tech Ops. In that group, they originally had proposed 9 different specifications for reports, and Joseph and I proposed a much simpler method of just creating a registry of reports and a registry of what they look like. And so with one document where we are, predefining all of those standardized documents in a way for that to evolve much more easily than having individual documents per report. So that was a good collaboration between TechOps and Regex. And I think with that, I will now move this over to Antoine.
And that means I will have to unmute, right? Okay, then the next existing works, we have Mario. Mario has a presentation. Let's see if I can bring that up. Which one would you like to start? I think the reverse search you want to start with, right, Mario?
Please.
Let me share your slides, reverse search.
But just a few information about how this draft is going on. Next slide, please. I just posted a new version that replaces the reference to obsolete RFCs 7482 and 7483. So there is no relevant changes since the IETF last IETF meeting. Next slide, please. But I have some private feedback, first feedback coming from YASDIP. So I expect that YASDIP will provide a further feedback on the mailing list. YASDIP, correct me if I am wrong. I see that you are participating in the meeting, but the next steps are essentially to define a likely use case to explain better the proposal and the topic that the proposal aims to address. Faced new some technical points that are summarized here in the following, and eventually to review the query model to meet the requirements coming from these new feedback, and obviously add implementations other than the implementation provided by .it registry. As Jim has already said, we had some manifestation of interest from last interim meeting, so I'm quite confident that there will be some implementation of this proposal in the next future. Honestly, I don't know. I can say a date for a reasonable milestone for these to submit this draft to ISG, but I can presumably say that next spring could be a reasonable date. Next slide, please. Okay, that's all from my side about this draft.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Any questions to Mario? If not, then we are going to look for the deck again. And the next thing on the agenda, why doesn't this work for me as smoothly as with you, Jim? Ah, there it is.
Aspetta, mi metto anche in cosa, perché mi ero... Sì, un mero... Sì, me lo so.
Ah, now we see you, Mario.
Yeah, I forgot to switch the monitor, the video.
The video, let's see. So that was the reverse search document. The next thing on the agenda is the federated authentication of RDAP. Scott, do you have any comments to make about that? We saw that you posted a new version.
Sure. Thanks, Antoine. Scott Hollenbeck here. So indeed, just earlier this week, I updated the draft to address some suggestions made by Mario. He's done some implementation work, and so, of course, that's always valuable feedback. However, there were a couple things that he and I didn't quite agree on because they would be much more significant in terms of changing the way queries and responses are structured and formed. And so I threw that out to the list. Folks, if you looked at this draft, particularly if you've done any implementation work, I'd really value your opinions in terms of looking at those suggestions, letting me know what you think. I mean, it's not that they're unreasonable; it's just that they're big changes. So please take a look, share your feedback on list. It'd be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any questions to Scott about this one? If not, then we will go back to Mario about the JS contact, and I will put up your slides for those. And now don't forget to put on your camera so everybody can see you.
Yes. Just a couple of slides again about this draft. It is co-authored by me and Gavin Brown from Central NIC that I don't see now participating. Next slide, please. The new version, last version published reflect the changes on the JMap JS contact document. So the main changes are about how the localizations are handled in JS contact, so how can be handled in JS contact inside RDAP. Next slide, please. So I changed a bit the list of the map keys that are recommended to be used inside JS contact to represent some information that are the mostly used in information provided by registry. And as you can see, those map keys reflects the text existing on defined on RFC 5753, and the localizations are managed by including them in the localization map that is present in JS contact specification. Next slide, please. Next step is now JS contact spec is quite ready to be submitted to the ISG. Yesterday we had the meeting about the JMap meeting. So the last open issues are how to treat the gender information and how can the name be structured to follow to adopt the requirements coming from a public review issue of the Unicode consortium. But these changes doesn't have any impact on the information that are normally stored in the registry databases. So I don't think that there will be some other changes on JS content that will have an impact on JS content inside the ADAP. Obviously, I think that we have other implementation addition to .it. Central NIC has already done its own implementation, but is not live at the moment. It will be live soon. Other registry have manifested their interest in this proposal and are currently implementing it as it comes from the feedback from the last interim meeting. So I think that if the JS contact milestone in JMAP is next spring or April 2022, I think that the reasonable milestone for this document is the same. So April 2022. So I think that or a month later. So I think that we have to wait for the complete process of JS contact to finish the review process of JS contact inside ADAP. That's all from my side about this draft.
No next slide because you still.
Yes. I forgot.
But you will discuss this, right?
Because I changed the order of the slide.
Okay. Any questions for Mario?
I want to raise a question for the group here to keep in mind. This document.
This proposal, at least for Java implementers. So I expect feedback also on that side. I really finish.
Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Antoine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I want to raise a question for this group here with respect to this document in particular, because at the moment, this document doesn't have a designated status to go to with respect to going into publication. We have not had that. This is the one document, we actually adopted it expressly, leaving open this question of should it go onto the standards track, go on to experimental, be informational. We wanted to have that discussion. And I want to remind folks about that discussion with respect to this document. We will need to have that and make a decision. And the primary reason for that is that JS Contact, of course, our RDAP is currently implemented is with JCard, not JS Contact. So we really do have to think about what that means in changing the standard, and if that's really where we want to go. So we're not going to solve that question here, and do want to point out to folks that please do comment on that on the list and speak to that question, and we will have to ask that question and get an answer before we promote this document to a working group last call. Thanks.
I will say something about this argument. Yes, it's true that adopting this extension, the ADAP will be changed, but not formally. Yes, in substantially, but not formally, because as far as I know, the VCAD array property is not required in the ADAP response. So it seems to me that it's a a relevant change, but not a formal change of the RDAP protocol. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but I'm wrong or not. So maybe Scott can be more is more knowledgeable about this topic. But as it seems to me, an extension like any other. So because it's not that does not violate any constraint of ADAP, in my opinion.
Okay, I saw Murray first, but then he left and let Scott beat him. So Scott, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to hear what Scott has to say before I pipe up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Antoine. Thanks, Murray. Scott Hollenbeck here. Yeah, to be a little bit more precise, I think, Mario, you're absolutely correct. What we're talking about here is not something that is going to update the existing internet standard versions of RDAP, as in it's going to replace JCARD, and if you claim to be RDAP conformant, you have to do this. We're talking about a specification that will define an optional extension, which when it gets to wherever it's going to be, and if your server claims to support this extension, you will return information encoded instead of using JCARD as JS contact, right?
Yes.
But it says, but it's not going to formally update or otherwise deprecate, the bits that are out there in the existing RDAP standards.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Murray, go ahead.
Just maybe to help you answer this question, a couple of things I noticed. Section 5 is an implementation status section. Thank you for including it. I'm glad when anybody does that. It has one implementation so far, which describes itself as a proof of concept research implementation. Who else is planning to do this?
I would say towards about the Scott's comment. Yes, yes, I know that this would be the document presents also a transition for replacing the JCAD with JS contact. But at least, in my opinion, this transition will be completed when some condition will be satisfied. For example, a large number of implementation of JS content in RDAP instead of JCAD. So at the moment, this is only an extension, providing the information in an alternative format with respect to JCAD. So the transition process is a way to give that has been presented in the document, is a way to give guidance for the implementers to how to manage the period where both the JCAD and JS contact could be provided by the RDAP server. At the end of the transition process, in my opinion, hopefully we will arrive to a complete replacement of JS contact, but of JCAD. But I don't know the time that this transition process will take. So it depends. So I would treat this as an extension of the ADAP, obviously, a possible consequence is the complete replacement of JCAD with JS Contact, but I'm not able to say now we replace JS Contact with JCAD. So it could be that the JS Contact will never replace JCAD. So it might be that the ADAP server will be able to provide the contact information both in JS Contact and JCAD. Don't know. My hope is that at the end, the JCAD will be completely replaced, but I don't know the time needed for this transition process. So,
So what you're saying basically is this is the next step, right?
Yes.
Does that answer your question, Murray?
Purposes of this, I'm just trying to sort of give you nudges in the direction of should this be proposed standard, should this be experimental, the things that we would look at, I guess.
And I think we discussed that on the mailing list as well, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just providing input. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, then we have another question from Mark. Mark, go ahead.
You hear me?
Yep.
I was going to answer Marie's question by saying that as a client, as a developer of a RDAP client, RDAP browser mobile, I intend to implement GS Contact. Gcard is a pain in the ass and to implement GS Contact would be much better. But you know, it's related to the typical chicken and egg situation, right? I can implement it as a client, but you know, if nobody is shooting me data, then you know, what's the point? So I guess I'm looking forward for some registries or some RDAP server implementation to actually implement it, and I'll be, you know, implementing on the client side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And you know, looking at the time, so I think the ask of Murray was, you know, it will help if we have more implementation. I also see in the chat that Eduardo Alsalves is saying that they're currently monitoring JS Contact in support of the ICANN RDAP client, and he says definitely would help if there were more implementation to test parsing responses using JS Contact. So I think, Mario, if we can get some more implementations in there, it will definitely help the discussion about the question of Jim remains. We should really look at what the status of this document is when we're going for publication, and we should have a discussion on that on the mailing list. And looking at the time, I'm going to get the slides back up for the next document. Let's see where I needed to be. Where did I go? I think I was somewhere here. So thank you, Mario, for your presentation. I don't see anybody more in the queue. You can turn your camera off now. Yes, thank you. Then the next item of existing work is the use of internationalized email addresses in the EPP protocol. And let's see, is Dimitri in the meeting? Because he said he wouldn't be able to make it. No. So Dimitri asked us to put a last call on this because nobody has made any more comments. So I think there's James Gould, who I think will talk on this on behalf of Dimitri. Is that true, James?
Yeah. I mean, there's no additional work to be done on this draft. We feel that it's complete and it's ready for working group last call. So that's the request.
Okay, so that's basically the update. So when we get we'll talk about the request, Jim and I, then we will put up a formal working group last call. Thank you all. And then the last one, I think, was there any more? Or is this the last one? Yes, this is the last one. Redacted fields in the RDAP protocol. Jody, Roger, Jody, I see in the queue. Go ahead, Jody. No slides.
No slides, but I'll turn my camera on. So several updates have been made from the draft that we had from basically made from feedback we received from the mailing list and the joint regex and tech ops that Jim was mentioning. Some of the things that have been added is an explicit report for JS contact, support for registered name and reason properties in the JSON value registry. And we've added handling of entities with multiple roles to the JSON path consideration section. Now, our next steps were determining if we should be adding RDAP search, if it should be added to the draft. There's been discussions of it, but we'd really like to talk to or ask the working group if that should be added. Jim looked at the changes that would be needed, and we would need to change specific lookup response language from the draft. We need to replace it. We'd also need to use relative JSON path expressions for search responses and use absolute JSON path expressions for lookup responses. And then we need to provide examples of unredacted and redacted search responses to go along with the unredacted and redacted lookup responses we have. So we've discussed it before, but we just need the working group to decide if support for search should be added to the draft. That's the only known issue that we have with the draft. And then we're just also looking for additional review of the latest version of the draft, which is 0.1, I believe. That's all that I have for the update.
Remind myself to unmute when I start talking, right? Any questions for Jody? And we have a question from Gustavo. Gustavo, go ahead. Just press your unmute button.
Scared him away.
Yeah, we scared him away when we asked him to talk. Let's see.
He's
there he
having an
is.
issue. Maybe let him type something or give him another
Yeah.
chance here in a minute.
If your voice doesn't work, Gustavo, type something in the chat window. And while you are doing that, we'll go to Mario. Mario, go ahead.
Just a comment. I think that in my opinion, we should pass from having redacted responses in having redacted objects in responses. I think that this could be make it easier to treat this extension in search responses. I try to implement this extension in my RDAP server, and I found some problems with search responses because it seems to me that having a redacted array, not in the response, but in as an additional property of each object is more manageable. But this is my opinion. I don't know if anybody else has this the same feeling about the implementation of this extension.
Okay. Any response from you, Jody?
You know what? I think I'll let Jim answer this because I'm sure that he jumped on to be able to answer this question.
Okay, then Jim, go ahead. And folks, I want to remind everybody that we are right on the moment. We are on time. We have 1 more minute left for questions on this one, and then we really have to move on. So, James, go ahead.
Yeah, what was it? The question again? I missed the question that needed to be answered. You had that question?
For Mario, you mean?
Yeah, I didn't actually mean to answer Mario's question, but if you're asking me to do it, I need to know what that question is.
Or did you have another comment to make, James?
No, I did, because I saw Gustavo wrote in the chat there. He asked whether or not we consider creating a separate draft for search and a separate one for lookup. And
Yes,
documenters actually
did.
did come up, and there's the amount of reuse to be able to have it be in one draft makes a lot more sense if we were to add support for search to have them go together. So,
Okay,
so I'll
that's
answer
also-
Mario's question if you can re-ask it.
Mario,
No,
please type
no,
your
you-
question in the chat, and then we will move over to Richard.
Sorry, it wasn't. It wasn't a question. It was only comments. So
Thank you,
can
Mario.
take-
We
you
don't
can
have
take
any
as
more
a-
time.
you can take
We
as a
have no more
question.
time, Mario.
Maybe.
To also give other people an opportunity to talk. Richard, go ahead.
Be quick. So as far as the notion of included in this draft or in another one, I think that it would really, if we're going to include it in this draft, we should get after it and put it in and get it done right away, because I think that right now this draft is going to be, having it ready and done is going to be important for other needs of this draft as it relates to making it be useful and putting it into practice. And so, because I think that it was less important for search to be in there, although it would be nice for the sake of completeness. And so I think that broadly, if we're going to do it, let's dive in and make a run at it. And if there is a lot of efficiency, let's just get it done, recognizing that it's really there for public search, because that's when redaction comes into play. It's not in there for authenticated or private or some other sort of gated search, but really public search. But I think that if we are going to do it, let's just get after it and lean into it and not dither over it, because I think that to say it another way, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And if Jody doesn't have any more responses, then I suggest we move on, because we gave our next speaker a bit more time. Thank you, Jody. And next on the agenda is Mr. Crocker. Steve, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You didn't have slides, right?
Yes, and now I got to figure out how to pick up
Okay.
the slides. I guess I've requested them.
Didn't send them to. Did we?
Yeah, the slides are there in the meeting materials.
Okay,
I
then.
background here after the meeting got started. There we go. Steve's got them.
Okay.
They are
Steve,
in the meeting
do
materials.
it yourself. Yes.
All right. All I see is a new deck. Now I don't even see that. How do we get the deck up?
So with your name, there's a button that says Share Preloaded Slides. So we first have a hand, and then you have a document icon. Or don't you have that one?
Share preloaded. I'm sorry, I don't.
Look at your name in the queue. Yeah, there you go. Or do you want me to put them up?
Slides requested.
There it is. There it goes. And then it stops.
It went away. Look at my name in the.
Grant
Presenting
preload.
audio. So, oh,
So I granted you the opportunity.
here's the deck to share. Okay. Which chair? Which? I don't see. I don't see my slides in the.
Did you upload them, Jim?
At the top, you'll see a little loop arrow, curled arrow. Click that once, and then the slides will be there in your meeting materials.
So JS contact, reverse search, chair slides, reverse search, chair slides. I don't see one that looks like what I sent.
Okay.
Maybe it's one of the chair slides because you put it in.
No.
Nope.
Hold on. Let's just do it for you because it's there.
That will be fine.
And
Should I open them?
yes.
Now they're gone. Let's see. Reverse search.
Worst case, I could share my screen, but best if you put
And
it
I
up.
must say, Jim, that they are indeed not there. So they're
No
not in the
worries.
preloaded slides.
Okay. Are we having fun yet?
Yeah.
Do you want me to try sharing my slide, my screen?
It's funny because I see them there. Let me
Oh, you
just try and
share
do
them,
this one.
Jim. You share them and you click.
Yeah, I was trying to do that before. That's interesting. Actually, you know what? They're in the meeting materials, but they're not in the list of documents to be shared. How about that for an oddity? Wow. I don't know what to do with that.
How about I try sharing my screen?
That's
Yeah, go for it, I guess.
Go for it, and I will see if I can do it any other way.
Yeah, anyway, I'll be quiet now. If you can make this all work, Steve, go ahead. Let's just get started.
I have hit request to share.
And now I grant you. And there we go.
Good. And let me take a big risk here and try to move into presentation mode. There we go. Okay, now, which one do you see?
It works perfectly.
Okay, good. All right. So thank you very much. So this is new work that being proposed here, and the bottom line is to create an IANA registry of DNS registration data elements. It's all contained basically in this slide, although I have a couple more to show you. This work arose out of watching that there were multiple places where one could find out what the list of data elements are if one is working in the registration area, which we are. And so, for example, RDAP, EPP, ICANN contracts, and probably other places all have lists of data elements. And new ones are coming, and in particular, we've been working on a project that has some. Observe that there is no unified standard place to find a list of this data elements, and so the natural reaction is, well, let's create one. So we're proposing the creation of a unified IANA-administered dictionary, and we've put together a first cut at this in the internet draft that you have. This is not intended to be owned by our project or indeed any other project. It's intended to be a sort of building block that in the general spirit of how things are done on the internet, to put it out there, and then anybody can draw from it. And then, of course, it will have to be modified over time as people want to add. I don't think there'll be too much withdrawing of data elements, but from time to time adding new ones. And so a little tiny bit of governance in the usual way, an IETF appointed set of experts. And just to limit the scope of this, the point is to have the list of the data elements and a decent amount of definition of what they are, but not to have policy issues or implementation details that are generally specific to an application. And after some discussion, it became clear that this working group was the natural home for this. And one point that has come up in some discussions is it intended that this would cause or force a change to existing implementations or systems? And the answer is no. It's first and foremost intended to be aligned with what exists, and second of all, to be something that is available as needed or as desired, but not to act as a forcing function at all, except in the usual way that when something is there, it attracts attention, and so it's a sort of marketing issue. So that's the basic idea. Let me give you a brief glance at what the initial set of data elements that we've drafted together and put into the internet draft, but it's a first cut, and I will not at all be surprised or unhappy if this evolves over time. And where do we want to go from here? Well, quite obviously, we would like for this working group to adopt this as a work item and to emphasize where we want to go. This is not a protocol per se. This is a building block for protocols, that is, turn it into an IANA managed registry. And we certainly would like to get interest, support, commentary, and so forth from others. And to the extent that people are interested, would be more than happy to have co-authors. And then at the appropriate time, have an IETF appointed set of experts to oversee additions. That's the pitch. Questions, comments?
So we'll look at the queue for questions, and the first one that's up is James. James, go ahead.
What the problem that's being solved with this. We have data elements defined in EPP, and RDAP, and data escrow, and the new reporting draft has the capability of registering data elements as well. So is there an intent to try to normalize all these into one terminology or something that that needs to be enforced? I really don't get what problem is being solved. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's not an enforcement effort at all, but it's exactly what you said, that there are these lists in different places, and if one tries to ask, so what's the complete list, or are they the same, and so forth, there's no unified place to look. So this is an attempt at offering a place for common documentation of these, with the idea that at least at the outset, it would have essentially the union of what's in each of those. It's not clear that the lists that you referred to, RDAP and the others, all have exactly the same things in them. And so this then is sort of the beginning of a pathway that would provide a common list. It's not intended to provide pressure to change any of those, but as changes are needed, or as additions are needed, or as new applications come along, it provides a vocabulary and building block for those.
Okay, James, comment?
Most complete ROC that has the data elements is in the data escrow, the DNRD ROC. So if that was, when I look at this draft, this is a small subset of the data elements that are used in the DNS registry. So if you want to go to a place to start from, I would go there. Thank you.
And I paid particular attention to your phrase "small subset." that certainly gets my attention. How big is the full set?
The DNRD draft, it's got a lot of data elements. I would suggest that you review it. The DNRD draft supports multiple formats, but you can normalize those down to a single set of data elements.
Yeah.
At least as a starting point.
One quick comment that there's only in this, there's only one, in the case that you have multiple contact information in particular, so that you might have, an admin contact and a registrant and so forth, that would cause a duplication of types of fields like name and address and so forth. This is just a definition of those, and then out of a particular application, you might have multiple uses of those in a protocol. That may account, it does in what we're doing, that may account for a big difference in the count of the number of things that you're looking at.
Right. Well, just take a look at it, and you may get some value out of it. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Okay, next up, Richard. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it makes me allow preferences every time I do this. So a couple quick things. I think thing one, when I first looked at this, I was kind of struck by, I think that there's some overlap between this and RFC 8499. Thoughts about that? And then the second part of the, and so like, I guess broadly, I'm kind of in the camp of where Gould was, that I don't see what problem this is supposed to be solving. And to that end, I think there's some overlap with RFC 8499, which is a DNS terminology RFC that I'm sure that folks within earshot know. This is a learned group. And then the second thing is that there was a comment earlier in the discussion about that some of these things are mentioned in EPP specifications, some of these terms are mentioned in RDAP specifications, and I would offer that they can mean different things in different contexts. That the term of what these different things mean, one is what used is during the registration process, and then RDAP is what's used during the RDDS and the display process, and so they can mean different things. So the fact that they would have different definitions is not necessarily a bug, but a feature. And so I think that in this case, the notion of trying to get a unified definition around those could be a false goal. And then I'm also concerned, since these terms are frequently used in contracts, I would be worried about memorialize these things in IETF documents, because contracts sometimes refer to RFCs and give them status in a way that can have unintended consequences. So that's, again, these are all things that are sort of under the macro comment of, I'm not really sure what problem we're trying to solve here with this. Thank you.
Okay. Next in queue, Gustavo.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Finally it works. So my question is, if we find discrepancies between, let's say, the way that the admin contact is defined in RDAP and in data escrow or whatever, what is the intention in this new draft? To try to come up with one single definition? Or are you just trying to capture in RDAP is defined as this, in EPP is defined as this, in whatever RSC or document is defined this other way? So what is the idea? To have one standard definition or just to mention all the potential definition that we can find in all these different documents?
So let me suggest a third possibility, a third, literally. I don't think the purpose of this is to force anything, nor is this is the right place to try to document each of the variations. However, where there are the same idea, then the ideas that should be represented in or named in the same way. And where there are different ideas, then perhaps the best thing to do is to give them different names or have a way of differentiating them. So that at the end of the day, to avoid confusion about things that use the same names but mean different things. But the delicate point, and it's an important and perhaps somewhat subtle point, is that this should be a minimal specification rather than a maximal one. This is one that should, as I say, serve as a building block, and any mapping of these to particular applications or how it's used in RDAP in one way and the registration process in another way, then belongs in those applications and in the documents related to those. But to the extent that people do mean the same thing, it's good to have a reference to build on.
Okay, and sorry, Wilhelm, but Richard, I had to mute you because you were typing quite loud. I will put myself in the queue as well, because so I have a question too, Steve. So what do you do when you encounter a conflict? So when you have two definitions in two different places.
That's why we need a set of appropriate experts to decide what should be in the document, in the registry, and what to do about those. If there are conflicts like that, it's probably one of the more useful aspects of this exercise is that it brings those to the surface so that it doesn't cause confusion for people later. And there's multiple ways to resolve that conflict. Give different names to them, or agree that one means what you want and the other doesn't, or whatever. I don't have a fixed position about this. It's just that in terms of regularizing things and having a base to work from, forcing those kinds of questions to the surface is exactly the kind of thing that happens if you have a place for these things to be brought and dealt with.
Okay, I will put myself out of the queue now because of time, and I will give the floor to Mark, and then after that I will have some closing comments. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, just wanted to say that, I have another hat, and we actually help the space industry, and we actually run registries of terms and abbreviations used in space industry, and we actually add, multiple definitions and for the same keywords, and we manage that. And by having that registry there, they started a few years ago to clean this up. So at the end, it was very useful for them, and it's actually going to be an ISO standard soon. But so there's a good advantages of having a centralized registry, even when there are multiple definitions of stuff. Just for your information, if that helps in the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Then, so looking at the time, we really need to close because we are 3 minutes over time. Final comment from me, more as a chair to you, Steve. The one thing I do want to mention is that, we are all for standardizing, and our charter is actually explicitly supporting that. However, for the EPP and RDAP protocols, we do have some sentences in there that every document that we produce should be as widely applicable as possible, meaning that it is, it's about registries in general and not only DNS registries. In your list of examples, for example, I didn't see any autonomous system numbers or route objects or enum registrations in there. Which are, when you want to have EPP and RDAP to be as broad a possible registration protocol and data access protocol, it shouldn't only be about DNS elements. And I would advise, if you want this to succeed, to seek support from other ones who are using EPP and RDAP to find the missing element, like James already said as well, what you have now is a subset, and I'm very curious how we get the whole set for this to succeed.
That's a very helpful comment. I'll take that as a friendly amendment. Certainly no objection whatsoever to having the same idea expanded to cover data elements that are needed in other areas, particularly in the routing and addressing communities and so forth. So that would be fine. No problem whatsoever.
Okay, Mark, if you have a small question, you can still ask it, but I think we will be cut off otherwise. And he left this comment. Okay, then thank you very much, Steve. I think we will continue the discussion on the mailing list, and we will see a call for adoption there, and then we will, at the end, of course, have a vote about it. But I think there can be some more discussion on the mailing list to see if people find this worthwhile to do in our working group.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Steve. And with that, like I said, we are 5 minutes over time. And if there are no more any other business, which was the last item on our agenda, does anybody have any other business? No. Then I would say meeting adjourned and see you all next time. I hope it will be live somewhere. And otherwise, we'll talk on the mailing list. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks.